I watched from the shadows as Alexander dropped to one knee in front of my best friend. For years I'd been his executive assistant, 3 years his secret lover, and 10 seconds was all it took to shatter my world. That night I emptied my desk, blocked his number and vanished without a trace. 6 months later, the mighty CEO of Reynolds Enterprises knelt in the rain outside my new apartment. But this time I wasn't the one with tears in my eyes. The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I stood in the dimly lit corner of the Reynolds Enterprises anniversary gala. No one noticed me, they never did when Alexander Reynolds was in the room. His commanding presence always drew every eye, including mine. I'd spent 4 years perfecting the art of watching him without seeming to. For years memorizing the curve of his smile, the way his brow furrowed when reviewing contracts, how his voice deepened when we were alone. 4 years knowing his coffee order, his allergies, his mother's birthday, and the exact shade of navy blue he preferred for his ties. 3 of those years, I'd also known the weight of his body on mine, the taste of whiskey on his tongue at midnight, and the sound of my name, Amelia, whispered against my skin in hotel rooms he paid for in cash. Just a little longer, he'd promised last month, tracing patterns on my bare shoulder as dawn broke through expensive curtains. The merger with Sinclair Industries is delicate. We can't complicate things right now. I'd nodded, swallowing my objections. Always did. Now I watched as he navigated the ballroom with practiced ease, stopping to charm investors and slap colleagues on the back. Rebecca Sinclair floated beside him in a crimson gown that made my simple black dress feel like a uniform. Which in many ways it was. Rebecca, my childhood friend who'd returned from Paris 3 months ago, who still texted me every other day to catch up, who had no idea that the man holding her waist had held me just yesterday. "They make a striking couple," whispered Sarah from accounting beside me. I managed a tight smile. Mr. Reynolds makes strategic connections everywhere. "Speaking of strategy," Sarah continued, oblivious to my discomfort, "there's a rumor the Sinclair merger isn't just about business." The champagne turned sour in my mouth. I'd heard the rumors too. Alexander's mother had made her expectations clear. The Reynolds family needed the prestige of the Sinclair name almost as much as they needed their European connections. The box of Alexander's belongings sat untouched in my apartment hallway for 3 days after the gala. My resignation letter, delivered electronically at 3:17 a.m., had triggered 17 missed calls and 32 text messages, none of which I read beyond their preview notifications. "Amelia, what is this? You can't just quit without notice. This is unprofessional. We need to talk. Where are you?" By the afternoon following the proposal, his messages had shifted. "I can explain. It's not what you think. This is business, you know that. Please, answer your phone." I spent those 3 days methodically dismantling our connection. I changed my phone number, deactivated social media accounts, asked my landlord to return any deliveries in my name. On the 4th day, Rebecca called my emergency-only burner phone, the number I'd given her years ago when we promised to always be there for each other. "Amelia? Thank God. I've been trying to reach you everywhere. Are you okay? Alexander said you quit without notice and no one knows where you are." The sound of her voice, genuinely concerned, completely innocent, made something crack inside me. "I'm fine," I managed, staring at the ceiling of my bedroom. "Just needed a break. You could have told me. I've been so worried, especially with all this wedding excitement. I need my maid of honor reachable, you know." The title hit like a physical blow. Maid of honor. Standing beside Rebecca as she married the man who'd spent countless nights in my bed. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. "About that," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm actually leaving town for a while. Work opportunity. Last-minute thing." "What? No. You can't. We've been planning our weddings together since we were 10. Remember how we swore we'd be each other's maids of honor no matter what?" I closed my eyes, remembering 2 little girls with gap-toothed smiles making pinky promises. Before I knew Alexander Reynolds existed. Before I became the other woman to my own best friend. "I'm sorry, Beck. I just can't." Silence stretched between us until Rebecca spoke, her voice smaller. "It's that bad, whatever's happening with you?" It's that necessary, I replied. After hanging up, I finished packing my essential belongings. The lease termination would cost 2 months' rent, but my emergency fund could handle it. 3 years of being a secret had taught me to prepare for sudden endings. When my doorbell rang at midnight, I knew who it was before checking the peephole. Alexander stood in the hallway, his usual immaculate appearance disheveled. His tie hung loose, hair uncombed, eyes bloodshot. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. "You can't just quit and disappear," he said without preamble. "The Anderson deal is next week. The quarterly reports need your revisions. My mother's birthday dinner." "Congratulations on your engagement," I interrupted, voice flat. He had the decency to flinch. "That's business, Amelia. You know how these things work." "Do I? The Sinclair merger needs this. My family expects it. It doesn't change us." A hollow laugh escaped me. "There is no us, Alexander. There never was." His expression hardened. "Don't be dramatic. We can continue exactly as before." "You mean I can watch you marry my childhood friend while continuing to sleep with you in secret?" "You've always understood my position," he said, lowering his voice. "The expectations, pressure. Rebecca understands too. This is as much a business arrangement for her as it is for me." "Does she know about us?" His silence was answer enough. "That's what I thought." I stepped back, hand on the door. "Goodbye, Alexander." "You're making a mistake," he said, voice edged with the authority that commanded boardrooms. "No one walks away from me." I met his eyes, this man I'd loved in shadows for 3 years. "Watch me." The door closed with quiet finality. The next morning I was on a train to the coast with 2 suitcases and a new prepaid phone. My cousin Jordan had a spare room in their beachside apartment, no questions asked. The corporate world could survive without another sacrificial assistant. Alexander Reynolds would find someone else to warm his bed between business acquisitions. As the city receded behind me, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Rebecca had sent her save the date, 6 months from now at the Reynolds estate. The irony wasn't lost on me that the date coincided exactly with what would have been the anniversary of the first night Alexander and I crossed the line from professional to personal. Some wounds cut too deep for bandages. Some betrayals required complete amputation. I deleted the email, turned off my phone, and watched the landscape transform from concrete to coastline. Alexander always said I was exceptionally organized. He'd soon discover I was equally thorough at disappearing. The coastal town of Port Haven offered everything my life in the city hadn't. Anonymity, quiet, and a distinct lack of luxury office towers with floor-to-ceiling windows. My cousin Jordan's apartment sat perched on a cliff overlooking the restless Atlantic, the constant roar of waves drowning out the echoes of Alexander's voice in my head. "You'll feel better after your first storm," Jordan said, setting a mug of tea beside me on the weathered balcony railing. "Something about watching nature rage makes human problems seem smaller." I managed a weak smile. "Is that what I'm doing? Raging?" "Surviving," they corrected. "Different thing entirely." Jordan, with their blue hair and psychology degree, asked no questions when I appeared on their doorstep. They simply made up the spare room and added my name to the Wi-Fi password list. The only condition: I had to join them for sunset on the balcony each evening. Part of the healing process, they'd insisted. Watching something end beautifully every day. 2 weeks into my self-imposed exile, Alexander's messages to my old number finally stopped. I'd checked them that morning from Jordan's laptop. 67 texts ranging from commanding to pleading to furious. The final one simply read, "I will find you." I deleted the email account that evening. "You know," Jordan remarked, watching me stare at the horizon, "at some point you'll have to tell me who broke you." "I'm not broken," I snapped, then softened at their raised eyebrow. "Sorry. I just prefer thinking of it as a strategic retreat." Ah yes. The corporate world's favorite euphemism for running away. I couldn't help but laugh. "God, you sound like..." His name caught in my throat. Jordan didn't press. Instead they said, "The sandbar is hiring." Owner's a friend. No resume required, just someone who can mix drinks and deflect unwanted attention. That's how I became Mia Carter, newest bartender at Port Haven's only oceanfront bar. Gone were the designer outfits and meticulous updos. My new uniform consisted of jeans, black t-shirts and a perpetual ponytail. The patrons, mostly locals and weekend tourists, cared more about prompt service than my background. The sandbar's owner, Leo, was nothing like Alexander. Where Alexander commanded attention, Leo moved through the world with easy confidence. Where Alexander calculated every gesture for maximum impact, Leo's laugh erupted without restraint. Where Alexander kept secrets, Leo seemed incapable of being anything but authentic. "So what's your story, Mia, who doesn't like questions?" he asked one night after closing as I wiped down the bar counter. "No story," I replied automatically. "Just needed a change." Leo's eyes, warm brown instead of Alexander's steely blue, assessed me without judgment. "Fair enough. Everyone here's running from something." "I'm not running," I said, the denial worn smooth from repetition. He shrugged, unperturbed. "Standing still somewhere new then." 3 months passed. I settled into Port Haven's rhythms. The locals stopped seeing me as an outsider. My hair grew longer, my skin tanned, my corporate posture gradually replaced by the relaxed stance of someone who no longer spent their days anticipating another person's needs. Then Rebecca's wedding invitation arrived. The cream envelope with gold embossing looked obscenely out of place on Jordan's driftwood coffee table. How she'd found my address was less mysterious than why she'd bothered. My silence these past months had been absolute. Inside, beyond the formal invitation to celebrate the union of Alexander Reynolds and Rebecca Sinclair, a handwritten note fell onto my lap. I don't know why you disappeared, but I miss my best friend. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. Please come home. Love, Beck." The familiar nickname pierced my carefully constructed defenses. I traced her handwriting with my fingertip, remembering 20 years of friendship before Alexander Reynolds entered our lives. But it was the second piece of paper that turned my blood cold. A smaller note in a different hand, bold, precise strokes I'd recognize anywhere. "I told you I'd find you. This doesn't end until I say it does." I dropped the paper as if burned. "Bad news?" Jordan asked from the kitchen doorway. I gathered the invitation and notes with trembling hands. Just a reminder of what I left behind. That night at the sandbar, I fumbled orders and broke 2 glasses, earning concerned glances from Leo. "Go home, Mia," he finally said around midnight. "Whatever ghost is haunting you tonight, face it sober." I walked the cliffside path slowly, the invitation heavy in my bag. Alexander had found me. The message was clear. My disappearance was merely an inconvenience, not an endpoint. In his world, nothing ended until Alexander Reynolds decided it was over. Back at the apartment, I stood on the balcony watching moonlight fracture across the restless ocean. The woman who had loved Alexander, who had accepted crumbs of affection in hotel rooms and after-hours offices, would have been frightened by his threat. Would have considered returning to minimize damage. But that woman had vanished months ago. I took out my phone and opened a secure email account I'd created for emergencies. Fingers steady, I typed a message to Rebecca, not Alexander, with no return address. "Beck, I can't attend your wedding. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. Be happy if you can, but be careful who you trust. Goodbye." I deleted the account immediately after sending it. Below, the waves crashed against the cliffs, eroding everything they touched given enough time. I found the metaphor oddly comforting. Life has a strange way of settling into new patterns when you're not looking. 6 months after leaving the city, I no longer flinched when the door to the sandbar opened. I'd stopped scanning crowds for Alexander's silhouette. My nightmares, where I stood silent and invisible at Rebecca's wedding, came less frequently. "You're actually smiling these days," Leo commented one quiet Tuesday afternoon as we prepped the bar for evening service. "It suits you." I rolled my eyes but couldn't suppress the slight curve of my lips. Don't get used to it. I have a reputation for stoicism to maintain. Ah yes, mysterious Mia, the bartender with no past. He tossed a lime in the air, catching it behind his back. That act might work on the tourists, but the locals have you figured out. Is that so? I sliced lemons with practiced efficiency. And what exactly have they figured out? Leo leaned across the bar, his voice dropping conspiratorially. That beneath that carefully constructed shell is someone worth knowing. The compliment, simple, direct, without agenda, caught me off guard. With Alexander, praise had always been strategic, designed to elicit a specific response. Leo's earnestness was still foreign territory. Careful, I warned, pointing my knife at him playfully. Almost sounds like you like having me around. Imagine that, he replied before the first customers of the evening pushed through the door. Later that night, after closing, Leo invited me to stay for a drink, a ritual that had become increasingly common. We sat at a corner table, the only light coming from the small candle between us and the moon reflecting off the ocean beyond the windows. I have a confession, he said, swirling amber liquid in his glass. My body tensed instinctively, conditioned by years of Alexander's confessions that usually preceded some new boundary of our secret relationship. Leo continued, oblivious to my reaction. I've been working on something and I'm nervous about your opinion. My opinion? He pushed a folder across the table. Inside were drawings, architectural sketches of a building with large windows facing the ocean, interior designs showing a restaurant space with a central bar. I'm buying the old Murray property up the coast, he explained, eyes bright with excitement. Expanding the sandbar into a proper restaurant. These are the preliminary designs. I flipped through the pages, genuinely impressed. Leo, these are amazing. But why would you care what I think? His expression turned serious. Because you have the best business mind of anyone I know. Because you notice details others miss. Because, he hesitated, I'm hoping you might consider being part of it. Part of it? As a partner. Business partner, he clarified quickly. You've revamped our inventory system, streamlined ordering, and somehow magically increased profits by 20% in 4 months. I'd be an idiot not to try to keep you around. The offer blindsided me. In my previous life, I'd helped Alexander build his empire without recognition. Now Leo was offering legitimate partnership in something we could build together. I don't know what to say, I admitted. Say you'll think about it, he replied, no pressure in his voice. That's all I'm asking. I nodded, suddenly overwhelmed. I will. Walking home that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Possibility. Not the stolen possibility of clandestine moments with Alexander, but real, tangible potential for a future I could claim openly. The feeling lasted until I reached Jordan's apartment and found an envelope slipped under the door. Heavy cream paper with the Reynolds Enterprises logo embossed in the corner. Inside was a single photograph. Me behind the bar at the sandbar, laughing at something Leo had said. The image was clearly taken from outside through the window. On the back, written in Alexander's unmistakable hand, "Did you really think I'd let you go so easily?" My blood ran cold. I tore the photo into pieces, hands shaking. "Jordan." I called out, needing someone else's presence to anchor me. The apartment remained silent. They were staying overnight at their partner's place. I was alone with the knowledge that Alexander had found me. Not just my address but my workplace. My new life. I checked the door locks twice, then the windows. Drew all the curtains. Sat with my back against the wall, knees pulled to my chest. My phone buzzed with a text from Leo. No pressure about the offer. "Sleep well, Mia." The kindness in those simple words contrasted sharply with Alexander's threat. I stared at the torn pieces of the photograph scattered across the floor, feeling something shift inside me. The old Amelia would have packed her bags, disappeared again, kept running. But I wasn't just Amelia anymore. I was also Mia, the woman who had rebuilt herself from scratch, who had earned respect without sacrificing dignity, who had found people who valued her for herself, not her utility. I stood up, gathered the torn photograph and flushed the pieces down the toilet. Then I sent a text to Leo. I'm interested in discussing partnership terms. Lunch tomorrow. As I prepared for bed, another text arrived, from a number I didn't recognize. You look happy. He seems nice. Does he know you're still technically mine? I blocked the number immediately, but sleep didn't come until dawn. When it did, I dreamed not of Alexander's threats, but of Leo's restaurant by the sea, filled with light and possibility. For the first time in months, I woke up ready to fight rather than flee. The coastal storm hit Port Haven with apocalyptic fury, turning midday into twilight as rain lashed against the sandbar's windows. Only the most dedicated locals had braved the weather, creating a cozy atmosphere inside despite nature's tantrum outside. Another round for the storm watchers, Leo announced, pouring generous measures of whiskey for the fishermen huddled near the fireplace. On the house. I smiled, arranging glasses on a tray. 1 week had passed since Alexander's photograph and threat. 1 week of jumping at shadows, scanning every customer's face, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But with each passing day that nothing happened, my resolve strengthened. This was my life now. I wouldn't surrender it without a fight. Thinking about returning my partnership offer? Leo asked, misreading my expression as he passed behind me. Actually, I'm drafting the counteroffer in my head, I replied. Your profit projections need work. His laugh warmed something inside me that had been cold for too long. Of course they do. That's why I need you. Need not want. The distinction wasn't lost on me. Alexander had wanted me. For convenience, for pleasure, for the meticulous way I organized his life. But he had never needed me. I was replaceable in his world. I always had been. The bar door flew open with a gust of wind and rain, drawing everyone's attention. A tall figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, water streaming from an expensive overcoat that was hopelessly inadequate against the coastal storm. My glass slipped from suddenly numb fingers, shattering on the floor. Alexander Reynolds had arrived. He looked simultaneously exactly as I remembered and like a stranger. The same commanding presence, the same perfectly styled hair despite the rain, the same steel blue eyes that had once made my heart race. But there was something different too, a hardness around his mouth, a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. His gaze locked on me instantly as if he'd known exactly where I would be standing. Amelia, he said, voice carrying across the suddenly silent bar. Leo glanced between us, confusion evident. You know this guy, Mia? The name discrepancy wasn't lost on Alexander, whose eyes narrowed slightly. Mia? That's interesting. I found my voice, though it sounded distant to my own ears. What are you doing here, Alexander? He stepped fully into the bar, letting the door close behind him. The expensive fabric of his suit clung to his frame, revealing the physique that graced business magazines' most eligible bachelor lists, a title he apparently still held despite his engagement. Is that any way to greet your former employer? He asked, false lightness barely concealing the steel beneath. Especially after you disappeared without proper notice. The familiar arrogance in his tone broke whatever spell had momentarily frozen me. I moved from behind the bar, keeping several tables between us. I gave notice. The fact that you didn't like it doesn't make it improper. Leo stepped closer to me, protective without being possessive. Everything okay here, Mia? Alexander's eyes flicked to Leo, dismissive in their quick assessment. This is a private matter between Ms. Carter and myself. Perhaps you could give us a moment. Actually, I said, anything you have to say can be said in front of Leo. And everyone else here. I gestured to the locals who watched with undisguised interest. Port Haven doesn't really do secrets. The jab hit its mark. Alexander's jaw tightened momentarily before he forced a smile. Very well. I've come to bring you back to the city. Your sabbatical has gone on long enough. There's a car waiting. A startled laugh escaped me. You can't be serious. Entirely serious. Your position is still open. He lowered his voice, though not enough. Everything can go back to how it was. How it was. The words came out sharper than I intended. You mean me organizing your life by day and warming your bed by night while you plan your wedding to my best friend? That how it was? The locals' murmurs grew louder. Leo's eyes widened. Alexander stepped closer, dropping all pretense of politeness. You're making a scene, Amelia. No, you made the scene when you tracked me down and threatened me. When you had someone take photographs of me. I stood my ground as he approached. And it's Mia now. You don't get to just reinvent yourself and pretend the past didn't happen, he hissed, close enough now that I could smell his familiar cologne. We had an arrangement. No, you had an arrangement. I had delusions. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist. You're coming back with me. Tonight. Before I could react, Leo was between us, breaking Alexander's hold with surprising strength. I think you should leave, he said quietly but with unmistakable authority. Alexander's laugh was cold. And who exactly are you to interfere? I'm the owner of this establishment, which means I get to decide who stays and who goes. Leo's voice remained level. Right now you're going. For a moment I thought Alexander might throw a punch. His hands clenched into fists, his breathing ragged. Instead he straightened his soaked jacket with forced dignity. This isn't over, Amelia. He reached into his pocket and withdrew an envelope, dropping it on the nearest table. Consider this a formal invitation to finish what we started. With that he turned and walked out, the door slamming behind him with a finality that reverberated through the suddenly silent bar. Leo turned to me, eyes full of questions he was too respectful to ask. You okay? I wasn't but nodded anyway. I will be. One of the older fishermen broke the tension. Well, I reckon whoever that fancy fellow was, he just got himself barred, Leo? A ripple of supportive laughter spread through the room. Leo squeezed my shoulder gently before returning to the bar, giving me space. I picked up the envelope Alexander had left. Inside was an airline ticket back to the city, dated for tomorrow with a handwritten note. The wedding is in 3 weeks. Your presence is non-negotiable. Don't make me come collect you again. Outside, the storm raged on, but for the first time since Alexander had reappeared in my life, I felt strangely calm. The confrontation I dreaded had happened and I was still standing. Alexander had shown his true colors not just to me but to people who cared about me. The power he'd once held over me, the magnetic pull of his attention, the addiction to his approval, felt diminished. Not gone entirely but weaker. I tore the ticket in half, then quarters, then confetti. Hey Leo, I called across the bar. Got a trash can handy? I've got something that needs disposing of. The morning after Alexander's appearance at the sandbar, Leo and I sat in his small office reviewing partnership paperwork. Neither of us had directly addressed the previous night's confrontation, but it hung in the air between us like storm residue. These terms look good, I said, scanning the final page. Though I still think your expansion timeline is aggressive. Leo nodded absently, then set down his pen. Mia, or Amelia. I'm not going to push, but if you want to talk about last night. I stared at the contract, tracing the line where I would sign my name, my new name. It's complicated. Most important things are. He leaned back in his chair. But here's what's not complicated. That guy showed up here, grabbed you, made threats, and expected you to drop everything and follow him. In my book, that makes him dangerous. A humorless laugh escaped me. Alexander Reynolds isn't dangerous in the way you're thinking. He doesn't hit women or slash tires. I met Leo's concerned gaze. His danger lies in making you believe you're nothing without him. That any happiness you find is temporary because it doesn't include him. Sounds pretty dangerous to me, Leo said quietly. I couldn't argue with that. For what it's worth, he added, I called Jordan last night. They're staying with their partner until things settle. The implication was clear. Alexander knew where I lived. Jordan might be collateral damage. I should leave, I said automatically, the old impulse to run surfacing. He'll keep coming back. Or, Leo countered, you could stay and face him. On your terms, not his. The concept was so foreign I almost couldn't grasp it. In all my years with Alexander, everything had been on his terms. I don't know how, I admitted. Leo pushed the partnership contract toward me. This might be a good place to start. I signed the papers with steady hands. Mia Carter, partner. Not executive assistant. Not secret lover. Partner. That afternoon, a courier delivered a massive arrangement of white roses to the sandbar. Alexander's signature flower, the same blooms that had filled his office every Monday. The card read, 3 days, Emilia. Then I take matters into my own hands. I dumped the flowers into the dumpster behind the bar, but the unease they planted remained. The next day Alexander proved his threat wasn't empty. A sleek black town car idled outside the sandbar all afternoon. The driver never entered, just maintained a visible presence. A reminder that Alexander was watching, waiting. This is harassment, Leo said, taking pictures of the car with his phone. We should call the police. I shook my head. Alexander practically owns the police commissioner back in the city. He probably has connections here too. Then we handle it ourselves. Leo's expression hardened in a way I'd never seen before. Port Haven protects its own. By evening the town car had company. 3 weathered fishing boats had strategically parked their trucks around it, blocking it in. When the driver tried to complain, he was met with the unified silence of locals who suddenly couldn't understand English. By nightfall the car was gone. But Alexander's campaign continued. The next morning my old possessions, the ones I'd left behind in my apartment, arrived in neatly packed boxes. My books, clothes, even the half-empty perfume bottle from my bathroom. A message accompanied the delivery. I've kept everything exactly as you left it. Time to come home. The invasion made me physically ill. He'd been in my old apartment, touched my things, packed them with calculated precision. He's escalating, Jordan said when they called to check on me. This isn't normal behavior. It's obsession. I know, I replied, staring at the boxes I refused to open. Have you considered a restraining order? I had, but restraining orders required evidence, police reports, documentation. All I had were flowers and returned possessions. Things any lawyer could frame as romantic gestures from a concerned ex-employer. That night, unable to sleep, I finally opened my laptop and did what I'd been avoiding for months. I searched for Alexander Reynolds. The business news sites painted a concerning picture. Reynolds Enterprises stock had dropped 15% in the quarter since my departure. The Sinclair merger was stalled due to contractual complications. Most tellingly, 3 executive assistants had been hired and had quit within weeks. Then I found something unexpected, a gossip column with the headline, Reynolds Sinclair wedding postponed again. Trouble in paradise? According to the article, the wedding had been rescheduled twice, with sources claiming Alexander was distracted and obsessed with a former employee who abruptly quit. Rebecca was reportedly reconsidering the arrangement. I closed the laptop unsettled. If the wedding was in jeopardy, Alexander had even more reason to fixate on bringing me back. In his mind, my departure had started the unraveling of his carefully constructed life. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Alexander wasn't pursuing me out of love or even lust, he was pursuing me because I represented control. By leaving, I had taken control away from him, perhaps for the first time in his life. My phone rang, an unknown number. Heart pounding, I answered. Emilia. It wasn't Alexander's voice, but Rebecca's. Don't hang up. Please. I sat frozen, unable to speak. I know you're there, she continued. I can hear you breathing. What do you want, Rebecca? Finally managed. To warn you, she said, voice dropping. Alexander is out of control. He's obsessed with bringing you back. He's convinced himself that everything started falling apart when you left. That's not my problem. It is when he gets on his private jet to hunt you down. Her voice hardened. He's coming back, Emilia. Tomorrow. My grip tightened on the phone. Why are you telling me this? A long pause. Because despite everything, you were my friend once. And because I finally figured out what was really going on between you two. The accusation I expected didn't come. Instead, her voice softened with something like empathy. He's not going to stop him. Not until he gets what he wants or until someone makes him stop. After hanging up, I sat in the dark of my apartment, Rebecca's warning echoing. Alexander was coming back tomorrow, more determined than ever. I had less than 24 hours to decide. Keep running or stand and fight. The answer came with startling clarity. I was done running. I picked up my phone and made a call I'd been avoiding. Jordan, I need your help with something. How much do you know about corporate espionage? Are you absolutely certain about this? Jordan asked, sliding a USB drive across the kitchen table. Once you use this information, there's no going back. Dawn light filtered through the apartment windows as I turned the tiny device in my hand. It contained evidence I'd inadvertently gathered during my years as Alexander's executive assistant. Questionable financial transactions, backdated contracts, emails suggesting insider trading. Nothing I'd collected deliberately, but information I'd had access to and had occasionally backed up as part of my meticulous record-keeping. I'm not using it to blackmail him, I clarified. It's insurance. A deterrent. Jordan's expression remained skeptical. Powerful men don't respond well to deterrents, They see them as challenges. I slipped the drive into my pocket. Then let him be challenged. I'm done being afraid. My phone buzzed, a text from Leo. He's here. Just pulled up in front of the sandbar. 3 days had passed since Rebecca's warning. 3 days of preparation instead of panic. Alexander had arrived exactly as she'd predicted, but this time I wasn't hiding. That's my cue, I said, grabbing my jacket. Jordan caught my arm. Be careful. Men like him are most dangerous when cornered. I know. I hugged them quickly. Thank you. For everything. Just come back in one piece. They managed a smile. Leo's been insufferable since you two became business partners. I don't want to imagine him if something happens to you. The morning air carried the crisp scent of salt and possibility as I walked the familiar path to the sandbar. For the first time since Alexander had reappeared in my life, I felt steady. Not fearless. Fear still thrummed beneath my skin, but resolved. The sandbar was closed at this hour, but Alexander had clearly found a way inside. Through the windows I could see him sitting at the bar, back straight, looking oddly out of place despite his casual attempt at coastal attire. Designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Leo's monthly rent. Leo stood behind the bar, arms crossed, expression carefully neutral. He caught sight of me through the window and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door, the familiar bell announcing my entrance. Alexander turned, his face lighting with triumph. Emilia. Finally. Alexander, I acknowledged, keeping my distance. You're trespassing. He dismissed this with a wave. Your friend let me in. We've been having a fascinating conversation about his establishment. The pause before the last word carried all his metropolitan disdain. Leo's eyes met mine. Mr. Reynolds was just telling me how he could buy this entire town if he wanted to. He exaggerates, I said. Reynolds Enterprises stock has dropped 15% in the last 2 quarters. The Sinclair merger is stalled. Not exactly the position of strength he wants us to believe. Alexander's smile faltered momentarily. You've been keeping tabs on me. I'm flattered. Don't be. It took less than 10 minutes online to see you're floundering without me. He stood, moving toward me with the confident stride that had once made my heart race. Now I recognized it as the approach of a predator, calculated, designed to intimidate. That's why I'm here, he said, stopping just far enough away to appear non-threatening. The company needs you. I need you. No, you need someone to organize your life and warm your bed while asking nothing in return. Kept my voice level. That's not me anymore. We were good together, Emilia. You can't deny that. We weren't together at all. We were employer and employee who occasionally had sex. You made that distinction very clear when you proposed to my best friend. His jaw tightened. That was business. And this is personal, I countered. I don't want you in my life, Alexander. Not as a boss, not as a lover, not even as a memory. I've moved on. To what? This. He gestured dismissively at the bar. Pouring drinks for fishermen in some forgotten coastal town? Playing house with the local bartender? You were meant for more than this, Emilia. You helped build Reynolds Enterprises. And got none of the credit, I added. Here I'm a partner. Equal. Respected. Alexander laughed, though it didn't reach his eyes. You think this compares to what we had? What we could still have? What we had was a lie. What I have now is real. His expression darkened. You're coming back with me today. The wedding is in 2 weeks and I need you to. Wait, I interrupted, disbelief coloring my voice. You're still marrying Rebecca? After everything? Alexander had the decency to look momentarily uncomfortable. The merger requirements haven't changed. Rebecca understands the arrangement. Does she understand you've been obsessively pursuing your ex-lover across the country? She knows I needed to bring you back to restore order to the company. The casual cruelty of it, the assumption that both Rebecca and I would accept our assigned roles in his life, ignited something in me that had been smoldering for months. Let me be perfectly clear, I said, stepping closer. I'm never coming back. Not to the company, not to the city, and especially not to you. Alexander's composed facade cracked. You don't get to make that decision. Actually, I do. That's how freedom works. His hand shot out, gripping my arm with bruising force. You signed a non-compete clause. You have proprietary knowledge of Reynolds Enterprises operations. If you think I won't use legal means to force compliance. Let her go, Leo's voice cut through the tension. He'd moved from behind the bar, his presence a steady reminder that I wasn't alone. Alexander's grip tightened. Stay out of this. I met Alexander's gaze without flinching. If you don't remove your hand in the next 3 seconds, I will use everything I know about Reynolds Enterprises' shadow accounting practices. Everything I backed up about the manipulated stock transactions before the Westfield acquisition. Everything I documented about your offshore accounts. His face drained of color. You wouldn't. Try me. The door opened behind us, the bell jingling cheerfully in contrast to the tension. Sorry I'm late, Rebecca said, stepping inside. Traffic was worse than expected. Alexander dropped my arm as if burned, turning to face his fiancée with obvious shock. Rebecca, what are you doing here? She looked different from how I remembered. Her designer clothes replaced with simple jeans and a sweater, her perfect makeup subdued, her eyes clearer somehow. Apparently, she said, glancing between us, stopping you from making an even bigger fool of yourself than you already have. In the stunned silence that followed, Leo quietly moved to stand beside me, a subtle gesture of support that didn't go unnoticed by either Alexander or Rebecca. You followed me, Alexander accused Rebecca. Obviously. She crossed her arms. Though I prefer to think of it as pursuing my own interests for once. This doesn't concern you, he snapped. Rebecca's laugh held no humor. My fiancé obsessing over another woman for months, postponing our wedding twice, then flying across the country to beg her to come back? I'd say that very much concerns me. She turned to me, her expression softening. Hello, M. Beck, I managed, the old nickname feeling strange on my tongue. For a moment I glimpsed the girl I'd grown up with, before wealth and status and Alexander Reynolds had come between us. This is a private business matter, Alexander insisted. No, Rebecca said firmly. This is you unable to accept that someone finally said no to you. The company is fine, she interrupted. My father's accountants have reviewed the books. Without Emilia covering for your creative accounting, the real numbers are finally visible. That's why the merger stalled. Alexander stared at her, comprehension dawning. You knew. About the financial irregularities? Yes. About you and Emilia? She glanced at me. Not until she disappeared and you went completely unhinged trying to find her. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Rebecca's warning call, her unexpected arrival. Why are you really here, Rebecca? I asked. She smiled faintly. To apologize. To see if my oldest friend might one day forgive me for being so blind. And, she added, looking back at Alexander, to finally end an engagement that should never have happened. Alexander's composure shattered completely. You can't back out now. The merger is off, Rebecca finished. My father withdrew the offer this morning. The color drained from Alexander's face. You can't do that. The board will. The board has already received copies of the real financial reports, Rebecca said calmly, as well as evidence of your increasingly erratic behavior. I watched the man who had once held such power over me crumble before my eyes. His commanding presence diminished, his confidence evaporated. Without his carefully constructed facade, Alexander Reynolds looked smaller, almost ordinary. You two planned this, he said, looking between Rebecca and me with dawning horror. No, I said honestly. This is just what happens when people stop enabling you. For a long moment nobody spoke. Then Alexander straightened, attempting to reassemble his dignity. This isn't over, he said, but the threat sounded hollow even to my ears. Actually, I replied, pulling the USB drive from my pocket, it is. This contains every questionable decision you've made that I was aware of. Rebecca has her copies. If you ever contact me again, if you so much as mention my name, these go to the SEC. He stared at the tiny device as if it were a loaded gun. You wouldn't destroy everything we built. I'm not destroying anything, I said. I'm protecting my future. The choice of what happens to yours is entirely up to you. Alexander looked from me to Rebecca to Leo, searching for weakness, for an opening, for the control he'd always maintained. Finding none, he turned and walked out without another word, the bell announcing his exit with the same cheerful tone it had used for his arrival. 1 year can change everything. The grand opening of Horizon, our expanded oceanfront restaurant, coincided almost to the day with my first anniversary in Port Haven. String lights twinkled against the twilight sky, illuminating the expansive deck where locals and visitors mingled, cocktails in hand. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses mingled with gentle waves breaking below the cliff. We actually pulled it off, Leo said, appearing beside me at the railing. Against all odds and construction delays. I smiled, taking in the restaurant we'd built together. The gleaming bar stretching along one wall, the floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Atlantic, the subtle nautical touches that honored Port Haven's history without descending into kitsch. It's perfect, I said. Even better than your sketches. That's because you improved every design I came up with. He handed me a glass of champagne. To partnerships. We clinked glasses, his eyes holding mine with quiet intensity. Over the past year, our relationship had evolved gradually, naturally, moving from colleagues to friends to something more, each step taken with deliberate care, each boundary openly discussed. The opposite of my time with Alexander in every possible way. There she is. Jordan's voice carried across the deck as they approached, arm in arm with their now fiancé. The marketing genius behind Port Haven's hottest destination. I laughed, accepting their hug. Less genius, more stubborn persistence. Take the compliment, Mia, Jordan insisted, using the name I'd fully embraced as my own. Horizon is booked solid for 3 months. The website crashed twice from reservation requests. You earned this. Perhaps I had. The marketing strategy had been entirely mine, focusing on sustainable seafood, local ingredients, and the dramatic ocean views. I'd built relationships with travel writers, coordinated features in coastal living magazines, and created social media content that attracted visitors from across the region. All skills I'd honed working for Alexander, but now deployed for something that was partly mine. The crowd parted briefly, revealing a familiar figure near the entrance. Rebecca, elegant as always but with a new softness to her, scanned the room until our eyes met. She raised her hand in a hesitant wave. I excused myself from the group and made my way to her. You came, I said, genuine pleasure warming my voice. Wouldn't miss it. He handed me a small wrapped package. Housewarming gift. Or restaurant warming, I suppose. Inside was a beautiful blown glass paperweight, swirls of blue and green capturing the essence of ocean waves. It's wonderful, I said. Thank you. Rebecca glanced around appreciatively. This place is amazing, Em. Truly. It's Mia now, actually. The correction came gently. She nodded, understanding. Mia. It suits you. An easy silence settled between us. Not the comfortable quiet of our childhood friendship, but not the painful emptiness of betrayal either. Something new, tentative but genuine. How long are you staying? I asked. A few days. I bought a cottage about 20 minutes up the coast. At my surprised expression, she added, after everything that happened, I needed somewhere untouched by that life. I understood completely. And, she hesitated, I've been thinking about opening a small art gallery. The area has amazing local artists with no dedicated showcase. That's a great idea, I said, meaning it. Rebecca's smile held relief. I was hoping you might give me some marketing advice. If that's not too awkward. Not awkward at all, I assured her. Partners meeting next week? Leo makes incredible blueberry scones. I'd like that. As Rebecca moved to the bar, Leo rejoined me, his hand finding mine naturally. Everything okay? He asked. Surprisingly, yes. I squeezed his hand. She wants marketing advice for a gallery she's planning. Leo's expression remained neutral. And you're okay with that? Given your history. I considered the question seriously. I think I am. What happened between us, it was never really about Rebecca. She was just part of Alexander's world, caught in the same manipulation I was. Speaking of, Leo said carefully, have you heard anything? I shook my head. In the months following our confrontation, news about Alexander Reynolds had filtered through business channels. The SEC had indeed launched an investigation into Reynolds Enterprises. Alexander had been forced to step down as CEO pending the outcome. The company's stock had plummeted further. He had not attempted to contact me again. Good, Leo said simply, wrapping an arm around my waist. The evening progressed perfectly. Jordan gave a toast that made everyone laugh. Rebecca chatted easily with locals who had no idea of our shared history, and Leo moved confidently through the space, every inch the restaurant owner he'd always dreamed of becoming. Around midnight, as the last guests departed and staff began cleanup, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The full moon cast a silver path across the dark water, the endless rhythm of waves against the cliff a reminder of nature's constancy amid human drama. Penny for your thoughts, Leo said, joining me on the small private balcony outside our office. Just thinking about time, I replied. How a single year can distance you so completely from a life you thought was inescapable. He leaned against the railing beside me. Regrets? Not one, I said honestly. Though sometimes I wonder who I'd be if I hadn't left that night. Leo considered this. Still Amelia Carter, I imagine. Just with less joy, less agency, and definitely less good seafood. I laughed, the sound carrying across the water. Can't argue with that assessment. For what it's worth, he said, turning to face me fully, I'm rather fond of who you became. The declaration hung between us, simple and profound. No hidden agenda, no power play, just honest emotion. I'm rather fond of who I became too, I replied. Leo's kiss tasted of champagne and possibility. Not the stolen, secret kisses I'd known before, but something offered freely in full view of anyone who cared to see. Later that night, after final lockup, we walked home along the moonlit path that hugged the cliffside. My home, our home now, waited ahead, warm lights glowing in welcome. My phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. Check your email. Gift from me and Sam. I opened it to find they'd sent professional photographs from the opening. One in particular caught my attention. Leo and me standing at the bar, heads bent together over some detail, both of us laughing. Behind us, the Horizon logo I'd designed gleamed in subtle lighting. The caption Jordan had added read simply, "The beginning." Everything okay? Leo asked, noticing my pause. I showed him the photo. Perfect timing by the photographer. Jordan has a good eye, he agreed, then looked at me curiously. Beginning of what do you think they meant? I slipped the phone back into my pocket and took his hand, continuing our walk home. That's the beautiful part, I said. We get to decide. The path curved ahead, following the coastline toward home. Like the journey that had brought me here, it wasn't the shortest route or the easiest, but it was breathtaking in its beauty and entirely mine to choose. Behind us, Horizon's lights still glowed against the night sky. Not a secret, not a shame, but a beacon visible to anyone who cared to look, marking something built with integrity, partnership, and a love that could bear the weight of daylight.